Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully, you're having an amazing day. We have lots of news to get through in this video, but let's start out with a question. What do Nvidia, AMD, Intel, and Huawei all have in common? Well, if you said that they work in the tech industry, you're not wrong, but that's not the only thing. All of these companies look to be using TSMC and 5nm. Allow me to explain a little further. So, a Taiwanese website by the name of Commercial Times has put out an article, which of course is based on their own sources, and this has been subsequently translated by the retired engineer. 5nm has been undergoing heavy investment from TSMC over the past couple of years, obviously, with products like Zen 2 already having tremendous success on 7nm. But, as always, technology continues to march forward. So to this year, we will see mass production of a couple of different products from Apple and Huawei, but the next couple of years after that, so 21 to 22, will be the products that I think the majority of you will find interesting. So AMD's Zen 4 architecture has been confirmed by the company itself to be using 5nm, so that isn't surprising. However, RDNA 3 is also going to be using 5nm according to this information. That hasn't been confirmed, to my knowledge, by AMD. However, I think you can probably have guessed that yourself, given the time frame that we're expecting RDNA 3 based GPUs to launch. It looks like RDNA 2 GPUs are going to launch in Q3, Q4. I actually heard it was going to originally be summer, but obviously with the current global conditions, let's say, that's been floating around, plus a few other reasons, AMD basically postponed the launch, although the RDNA 2 design is all done, and most of RDNA 3 is pretty much good to go as well. I think it may even be having engineering samples tested, but I'm not 100% certain of that. I at the very least know the design itself is done, so I'm not certain whether it's being taped out. As for Broadcom, Qualcomm, they also have a couple of products, but NVIDIA's Hopper architecture is another product we've heard a lot about. It is the successor to Ampere, assuming that's what NVIDIA's next architecture is called, Ampere. But Hopper is the generation after that, so it's Turing, Ampere, and then Hopper. And while there is an awful lot of excitement at the moment of what Ampere could bring to the table, and it's definitely going to be a big departure in terms of performance from what I'm hearing, Hopper is also a very big departure in the actual design philosophy of the GPU. The theory is it's going to essentially be MCM based. There's going to be a multitude of different chiplets that are kind of come together to form a whole. However, the design philosophy in terms of the actual chips themselves are apparently rather different here. Essentially, what we have is several different chips which all form together to make a larger whole. I guess one way to kind of look at this, if you need one kind of older example, would be back in the day, we had the old Voodoo 5 series. So it's a little bit like that, but obviously way more advanced and on a much bigger scale. This would allow them to produce a chip which is way more powerful than any single monolithic design. And two rumors that have consistently emerged with Hopper is that one, it's multi-chip, MCM, and two is that it's going to be on 5nm. So this basically continues to confirm that. But then after that, we have Intel and their Xe architecture. However, according to the website, they're uncertain whether this is going to be either the GPU or for FPGAs. And there have been lots of rumors that Intel will be tasking TSMC to produce some of their silicon. It was Jim at Adore TV who was also stating that according to his sources that Intel will be asking TSMC to produce their GPUs, and I've heard a couple of rumors myself, but honestly the source that told me was not one of my regular ones, so I kind of gave it a massive grain of salt and I didn't decide to follow up on it. But Jim's sources are normally pretty damn good, so I wouldn't be surprised if there is some truth to this. But whether it is an FPGA or whether it's the GPUs on the 5M, well, that unfortunately is the $64,000 question. And now on to a few things for the PlayStation 5. While we're still waiting for the console, of course, to be officially revealed, along with lots of stuff for the console in general, we're naturally waiting to even see what the damn thing looks like, and I think the next couple of months will be very fascinating for both systems. There has been a rather interesting patent which has been discovered, and this ties in very much to what we've been hearing from games developers, that Sony kind of wants an almost Netflix-like approach with the PlayStation 5. So what that means is that no, you won't have, seasons of games or anything like that. Instead, you'll have a firm understanding of how long a specific task in a game will take to complete. So, for example, if you're going to tackle, let's say, a mission in a single-player campaign, how long will that mission take? How long will this side quest take? And so on and so on. Well, to add fuel to the fire, there's been a new patent which has been discovered, and this almost certainly is kind of the final nail in the coffin that we're going to see a variant of this. And it seems to be using almost like an AI assistant, which is another thing we've been hearing about the PlayStation 5, that will have some type of AI assistant. Now, this looks a bit like Siri for Apple, and it basically means that it will use data from actual real players of how long a specific task is taken, and then it will basically fill that into your calendar so that if you've got, I guess you could say, limited time on like a specific evening or whatever, you will know what you can achieve on that specific game. This diagram here is pretty self-explanatory. It will take you about 45 minutes to complete this, but a show you watch is in 30 minutes. Would you prefer to continue with this specific task, or would you prefer to do something else which is only going to take around 30 minutes? And obviously, the benefit, of course, of SSDs is that you can skip to and from different locations really quickly. And another thing, of course, that seems to be a really big feature of the next generation is also the ability to switch between different games. And we've seen Microsoft, of course, demonstrate this rather quite a lot. So you could be running, like, let's say, Gears of War 5, and then if you want to go to Halo, it's pretty much instant. You can just switch between the two states very quickly, which, yes, has benefits in just not the frustration of needing to wait for the bloody game to load, but it also means that if you are playing a title like, let's say, a fighting game, and you're in, like, a big lobby, and it's kind of like winner stays on scenario, so let's say there's 4 people, and you're waiting for your turn, so you've got like 5-10 minutes to kill while you're just waiting to play. Well, that means that you could just play something else in the meanwhile, and then when your kind of turn is, it is now, and then you can select your character, it will basically enable you to just press a button, switch back to let's say, Street Fighter, choose your character, fight, and if you win, of course, you stay on. If you lose, then you can go back to your other experience. And it basically means that the downtime, I suppose, for gaming, and to actually maximize the fun that you're having and not just feel that you're stuck in a lobby or stuck looking at loading screens. And I think that this is going to be a really big deal for both consoles in the next generation. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing exactly how all of this is going to pan out. I'll also be curious whether all of these experiences are available at launch, or whether we're going to have to wait longer, let's say maybe until next year, for specific updates, especially with the cough situation, cough that's going around at the moment. I wonder if that's going to hold back features. I think it's going to be very interesting either way. And now moving on to another PlayStation 5 rumour. A couple of people have actually asked me my opinions on this one. I've actually had several DMs about it. And that is that Sony are considering having 2 different PlayStation 5s available for launch. And apparently the base model is going to cost $540 US. Well, that is technically in euros of 499, and then there'll be a premium setup which is going to cost 599 euros. And to add to this, the difference between the systems is not the, let's say, GPU performance or anything like that. Instead, it's the amount of SSD space inside the system. One, of course, the model we know about, has 825 gigabytes of space, whereas the other one has 1.65 terabytes. This would basically mean that each of the NAND flash chips on the system would be double the density. And it would be a little bit like what we saw with the PlayStation 3 when it was released and Sony had two different models of the system. The thing is, though, you're still asking people to spend a ridiculous amount of money. And a couple of people have pointed out, that Game, which is the retailer, this individual is stating that they've gotten this information from. Apparently, Sony are speaking to kind of heads of Game. Well, Game is a UK store, so why the heck are these prices in euros? And allegedly, this is because this information comes from Spain, because Game does have operations in Spain, and so apparently that's the reason that it's in euros. To be honest with you, though, I'm rather skeptical about this, because I don't think Sony would be willing to put out a console that's this expensive. Technically speaking, they could produce denser DRAM, because as Mark Cerny pointed out during the Road to PlayStation 5 presentation, they have opted to go with 12 lanes on the SSD. This is why you only have 825 gigabytes of SSD space as opposed to, let's say, 1 gigabyte. So, I mean, given the limited information we have about the PlayStation 5's SSD, theoretically speaking, they could do it. They could just go with denser memory, and therefore they could actually do this and double the size. I just don't know if they would, simply because of the price. When there's already so many concerns over the cost of the system anyway, I think it could cause some bad publicity. I'll start doing some digging to see if I can verify this or having a look around, but quite frankly, I don't think we're really going to know anything about pricing until Sony officially confirm the damn system. And I think at this point, both Sony and Microsoft, in terms of pricing and release date, are kind of waiting for the other one to blink. And it's probably also going to really depend on the state of the world over the next couple of months as well, and obviously how the world's situation fares in both economic as well as physical health. And in the final piece of news for today, there has been an awful lot of confusion regarding the frame rate of the next Assassin's Creed game, which of course is known as Valhalla, and as you can imagine simply by the name alone, it will prominently feature Vikings. But let's be honest, the main reason you want to know about Assassin's Creed Valhalla right now is the frame rate, as there has been a statement issued to Eurogamer. I'll of course link it in the description of the video, and I'll read it out verbatim. Ubisoft has always been committed to exploring new technologies, taking advantage of the capabilities of new consoles to deliver the most immersive experience possible. This is why we're excited to be collaborating with Microsoft to bring Assassin's Creed Valhalla to the Xbox Series X. Currently, we can guarantee that AC Valhalla will run at least 30 FPS. Assassin's Creed Valhalla will benefit from faster loading times, allowing players to immerse themselves in history and the world without friction. Finally, Assassin's Creed Valhalla will benefit of improved graphics made possible for Xbox Series X, and we can't wait to see the beautiful world we're creating in stunning 4K resolution, and we have a lot more information about Assassin's Creed Valhalla in the near future, so stay tuned for more information. Now, as you can imagine, this is not exactly instilling confidence that the title will run at 60 FPS, will it? And this is kind of awkward given Microsoft essentially promised recently that 60 frames per second will be the standard on the next generation console. I also suspect that if this is the case for the Xbox, the PlayStation will not fare any better. And I would love to know the reasons behind this, because there are several distinct possibilities. One is that the game is simply not being optimized enough in terms of performance, or maybe they are simply cranking up the visuals so much with lots of hardware-based ray tracing, whatever. They have chosen to just go the visual route and not increase the performance of the game, which I would be interested to hear your opinions on that, whether that's the route that you would want them to go. And I also wonder if this means that they are not taking advantage of things like upsampling on the next generation consoles. Microsoft have been very boisterous about this. They can render a game at a lower resolution, just for sake of argument. You could render the game at like 1440p and then upsample it. We don't really have a whole lot of information of how accurate that is. Obviously, Nvidia have done the whole thing of updating the RTX 20 series with DLSS 2, and it's really good. 540p on Control, for example, I wouldn't say is as good as native 1080p, but it's not too far off, especially when the game's in motion. It looks pretty damn amazing. So obviously, a technique like that for the next generation consoles could be amazing in terms of running the game at a lower resolution, cranking all of that power into improving ray tracing and other compute-based effects, having amazing looking textures, and then upsampling as necessary. And as we all know, native resolution, even for this generation, hasn't really been a thing with temporal upsampling anyway. If you recall from the beginning of the last generation, there was a crap ton of people who were extremely disappointed at the 30 FPS that were, well, basically synonymous with the games at the time. And of course, developers were pushing this whole cinematic experience thing. Obviously, at the end of the day, it is down to games developers. Microsoft, Sony, even Nintendo cannot mandate necessarily how a game should be created, and obviously they need to give developers a degree of freedom, although I don't know if this is necessarily a good look, both from an artistic standpoint as well as a PR standpoint for the next generation. And I'm going to be extremely curious to see how this evolves. I would also be interested from a PC perspective to see what actually it takes to lock this bloody thing to 60 FPS with all of the bells and whistles enabled. So I think it's, too early to call right now. I'm going to say it's probably both next generation consoles this will affect, but whether this is because of optimization issues, because obviously the game engine is still being ported to the next generation, whether it's the GPU which is the limiting factor, or whether it could be the CPU, which is definitely possible as well. What we do know about the next generation is that, from what Microsoft have said, a lot of developers are going to stick to 8 hardware threads, which is one of the reasons that they are offering those two modes, SMT off and SMT on. Obviously, with SMT off, you run the CPU at a couple of hundred megahertz more. It's 3800 versus 3600. So is it CPU that's the problem because they're cranking lots of detail into the world? So that's really hammering the CPU, and the game engine hasn't been updated to fully take advantage of up to 16 threads. Is it GPU focused? Is it just not optimized? Once again, I'm going to be fascinated to see how this evolves and whether Assassin's Creed will eventually end up at 60. But with all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. The normal stuff if you did, like, share, comment and subscribe, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.